Harvard had a way of humbling even the brightest minds. Students came from every corner of the world, valedictorians, prodigies, children of billionaires, and descendants of Nobel Prize winners. They carried with them a sense of invincibility, certain that nothing could stump them, until one cold November morning in a crowded lecture hall. The grand hall was filled with more than 200 students, each packed shoulder to shoulder, notebooks open, laptops glowing, anticipation buzzing in the air. The course was Advanced Theoretical Philosophy and Logic, a class notorious for being one of Harvard's most difficult. And today, the professor, Dr. Lawrence Whitaker, had promised something unusual. Dr. Whitaker, with his silver hair and sharp spectacles, walked slowly to the front of the room. He didn't bring his usual stack of notes. Instead, he carried only a single piece of chalk in his hand. The lecture hall fell into silence. "Today," he said, his voice echoing against the walls, "I will not lecture. Today, I will give you a problem. It is a problem no student in this class's history has ever solved during lecture. You have 90 minutes. The tension in the room rose instantly. Students glanced at each other, half excited, half terrified. Harvard students weren't used to failure, but they lived for challenges. With a slow, deliberate hand, Dr. Whitaker wrote the problem on the massive blackboard. Lines of complex symbols, abstract logic, and paradoxical equations appeared one after another. Some students leaned forward, already scribbling furiously. Others frowned, unable to grasp even the first line. When he finished, the board looked like a wall of impossibility. The professor turned, resting the chalk on the ledge. "Begin." The sound of scratching pens and clicking keyboards filled the hall. Students who had spent their lives dominating every classroom threw themselves at the problem. Equations spilled across notebooks. Hands shot up with clarifying questions. Whitaker, however, refused to give hints. He only said, "Think deeper. Don't just answer, understand." Minutes passed, then 30, then 60. Faces changed from confidence to confusion, then to frustration. The students whispered among themselves, realizing the sheer weight of the paradox before them. One by one, their heads dropped. Some shut their laptops. Others erased their pages angrily, unable to progress. Finally, after 75 minutes, one of the most celebrated students in the room, Ethan Callaway, son of a Silicon Valley tech mogul, a boy often called a genius since age 10, stood up. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "Professor, I think it's impossible. There's no solution to this problem." A murmur spread through the room. If Ethan was giving up, what chance did anyone else have? One by one, the other students nodded. Even the brightest, the boldest, the most confident among them surrendered. Dr. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "So, Harvard's best minds believe it is unsolvable." No one answered. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. And then, from the very back of the lecture hall, a soft voice cut through. I think I can try." Every head turned. Standing there was Amara Johnson, a quiet girl who rarely spoke in class. She was on a full scholarship, the first in her family to ever attend college. She worked nights at the library to cover living expenses. Many classmates hardly noticed her. Some whispered cruelly about how she didn't belong in such an elite institution. But now, her hand was trembling in the air, her dark eyes focused with a quiet determination. Dr. Whitaker studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured. "Come forward, Miss Johnson." Amara stood, clutching her notebook against her chest as she walked to front. The weight of 200 skeptical eyes pressed against her. Whispers filled the air. "She's wasting time. She won't solve it. She's not like us." Her heart pounded, but she took a deep breath and picked up the piece of chalk. The board loomed in front of her. The impossible problem stretched across it like a mountain no one had dared climb. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her mother's voice. "Baby, you don't have to be louder than the world. You just have to be braver than your fear." And then, with steady hands, she began to write. The chalk felt heavier than it should. Amara's fingers were tense, her palms slick with sweat. She could feel the room's energy pressing down on her. 200 pairs of eyes, most of them doubtful, some outright mocking, bore into her back. But she didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she studied the board. To the others, the problem had been an endless wall, an impossible riddle. To her, though, something different was unfolding. She didn't see numbers or equations first. She saw patterns, shapes, rhythm. Her father, before he died when she was only 8, used to say, "Every problem has a song hidden in it. You just have to listen long enough." So she listened. The room grew strangely quiet. Even the whispers died down as her chalk began moving. Not fast, not hurried, but with careful strokes, like a violinist warming up for a symphony. At first, her classmates smirked. Ethan leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. "She's just rewriting the question," he muttered under his breath. But then Amara did something none of them expected. She broke the equation into fragments. Instead of attacking the monster head-on, she circled around it, dismantling it piece by piece, almost like pulling apart the gears of a watch. "She's simplifying it," whispered a girl in the front row, confusion in her tone. Simplifying a problem like this wasn't supposed to be possible. But Amara's chalk kept gliding, erasing sections, reframing symbols, rewriting logic in ways that made the impossible bend. Her notebook, clutched tightly in her other hand, was filled with scribbles she had made months ago while tutoring herself late at night in the library. She had been fascinated by paradoxes. She had once spent 3 days trying to unravel one. Not for a grade, not for recognition, but simply because she wanted to understand how contradictions could hide truth. And now, all of that quiet, unseen work began to rise to the surface. The room shifted. Silence wasn't skepticism anymore. It was anticipation. Students leaned forward. They couldn't help it. The girl they barely noticed was doing something none of them had thought to try. Dr. Whitaker watched her with a gaze both stern and curious. For 30 years, he had seen brilliant minds crumble before the same board. But here was Amara, her jaw tight with determination, her chalk flying faster now, symbols merging into clarity. And then she stopped. Her hand trembled as she circled a single, final line. The equation, once a monster, was now a sentence. Clear, simple, complete. The answer glowed on the blackboard like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For 3 full seconds, no one breathed. Then the lecture hall erupted. "What? No way." She solved it. Students scrambled from their seats, rushing forward, staring at the board in disbelief. Ethan's face flushed red, his jaw clenched tight. Dr. Whitaker raised his hand, silencing the chaos. Slowly, he walked the board, eyes fixed on the solution. He didn't say a word at first. His fingers brushed lightly over the chalk lines as though confirming their truth. Finally, he turned, his voice measured but carrying an unmistakable tremor. "Class, she is correct." The word struck the room like thunder. Gasps echoed. A few students clapped instinctively, then stopped unsure. Others simply gaped at Amara as though seeing her for the first time. Her knees were shaking. She wanted to collapse. She wanted to cry. But most of all, she wanted to disappear before anyone could see the tears threatening her eyes. Dr. Whitaker's gaze, however, didn't waver. He looked at her as though she had just changed something far bigger than a classroom exercise. "Miss Johnson," he said quietly, "what gave you the courage to attempt what everyone else abandoned?" Amara swallowed hard. Her voice was soft but steady. "Because, sir, my whole life has been a problem everyone else thought couldn't be solved. And I'm still here." The room went silent again. No one dared laugh this time. For the rest of that lecture, no one said much. The board still bore her solution, clean and undeniable. Students stole glances at it, then at Amara, as though struggling to reconcile what they had just witnessed. When the bell rang, the hall emptied slower than usual. Some students hurried out, whispering to each other. A few lingered, as if waiting to see if she'd stumble, reveal it was a fluke. Amara packed her bag quietly, wishing she could melt into the floor. But as she slung her backpack over her shoulder, a voice cut through the crowd. "Amara," she froze. It was Ethan Calloway. His tone was sharp, not congratulatory. He marched toward her, his perfect posture and expensive leather shoes clicking on the tile. "You think this means something?" he hissed under his breath, close enough that only a few students overheard. One problem. That's all. Don't fool yourself into thinking you belong here. His words hit harder than she wanted to admit. Belong. That word haunted her every day at Harvard. In the dining hall, where kids wore $1,000 jackets. In classrooms, where classmates quoted philosophers she'd never even heard of. On weekends, when they flew home in private jets while she shelved books at the library until midnight. She clenched her fists. She wanted to reply, to defend herself. But before she could, another voice stepped in. Jealousy looks ugly on you, Ethan. A girl with short blonde hair and sharp eyes stepped forward. Her name was Claire, one of the top students in class, known for her wit and blunt honesty. She folded her arms. She saw what you couldn't. Maybe try humility instead of insults. The small crowd that had overheard nodded, some reluctantly. Ethan's face burned. Without another word, he spun on his heel and stormed out. Amara exhaled shakily. Claire gave her a small smile. Don't let him get to you. What you did today, no one's ever going to forget it. But Amara wasn't sure if that was a comfort or a warning. That night, the campus felt different. Whispers followed her everywhere she went. In the library, students who'd never noticed her before glanced at her. Some smiled, some stared with envy. At dinner, 2 freshmen she didn't know sat across from her and asked, "How did you do it?" "What's your secret?" Amara forced a smile, but inside, fear twisted in her stomach. Recognition was dangerous. Being invisible had been safer. She wasn't ready for eyes to track her every move, waiting for her to fail. When she returned to her dorm, she found a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned. It read, "Greatness comes with a price. Be careful whom you trust. A friend." Her hands trembled as she read it. She looked out into the dimly lit hallway, but it was empty. She folded the note and tucked away, her heart racing. The following week, Dr. Whitaker surprised the class again. He began the lecture not with a question, but with a story. Years ago, he said, "I gave this same problem to a student much like you all. He failed. In fact, every student failed. For decades, no one has solved it in this room. Until last week." He gestured toward Amara. Heat rushed to her face as dozens of heads turned. "I want you all to understand," Whitaker continued, "that brilliance does not belong to privilege, money, or legacy. It belongs to courage. Miss Johnson had the courage to attempt what you abandoned, and for that, she has earned not just my respect, but my admiration." The class clapped, some genuinely, others reluctantly. Amara lowered her gaze, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. But when she dared to glance at Ethan, she saw his eyes narrow. He wasn't clapping, his jaw was clenched, and in that moment, she realized her victory had made her a target, and targets rarely get to rest. The days that followed were a storm. Some students praised Amara, stopping her in the quad to ask about her background, her study habits, her genius. Others, like Ethan and his circle, whispered behind her back. She overheard fragments. She just got lucky. Probably cheated. They'll forget about her soon. The weight of it all grew heavier. She wasn't used to attention, positive or negative. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small dorm room, wondering if she had made a mistake by raising her hand. One evening, exhausted from tutoring sessions and library shifts, she found herself in Dr. Whitaker's office. He sat behind his desk, stacks of papers beside him, but when he saw her, he pushed them aside. "You look troubled, Miss Johnson." She hesitated, then admitted softly, "I don't know if I can handle this. Everyone is watching me now. Some are waiting for me to fall." Whitaker leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Do you know why I gave that problem to the class? Not to test intelligence, to test resilience. 90 minutes of silence, frustration, and surrender. That's where truth shows itself. And you, Amara, showed the truth of who you are." Tears pricked her eyes. "But what if I can't keep proving it?" He shook his head. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You already belong here, not because of solution, but because of your courage. Never let them convince you otherwise. Weeks later, Harvard hosted its annual academic symposium, where select students presented papers, theories, or solutions to an audience of professors, alumni, and peers. It was the kind of event that could define a student's reputation for years. To Amara's shock, her name was announced as one of the presenters. Dr. Whitaker had submitted her work without telling her. When she stepped onto the stage, nerves nearly consumed her. The auditorium was vast, filled with hundreds of sharp eyes, many skeptical. Ethan sat in the front row, his expression unreadable. Amara took a deep breath. She spoke not just of the equation, but of her journey, about how she had approached it differently, about the nights she had spent teaching herself concepts in the quiet corners of the library, about hearing her mother's voice reminding her to be braver than her fear. Her voice wavered at times, but her honesty cut deeper than flawless confidence ever could. She wasn't just presenting a solution. She was telling her story. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted. Not polite, not forced, but thunderous. Professors rose to their feet. Students clapped until their palms stung. Amara's throat tightened. She spotted Dr. Whitaker smiling, proud, Claire cheering, and even Ethan, though stiff, finally lowered his gaze in defeat. Later that night, walking back across the campus under the cold stars, Amara thought of that moment in the lecture hall when she had first raised her hand. She realized it wasn't the solution itself that mattered. It was the act of trying when everyone else gave up. It was daring to believe that her hand, small, trembling, unremarkable in a sea of privilege, could rise and change everything. And it had. For the rest of her time at Harvard, students remember her not as the scholarship girl, not as the girl who didn't belong, but as the girl who did what none of them could, the girl who raised her hand.